Jamie, welcome to my podcast. I am so happy that you're here. When I was thinking of launching a podcast, the first person that came to my mind was you. Is because right at that moment, we were also talking about podcasts for other companies. And I'm like, no, I thought about it before, but I should just do it. So, Jamie, thank you so much. I'll introduce you very quickly to my audience. So, Jamie is the godfather of social selling, the person who says whatever he says, I listen to very carefully. And most of the time, everything said that he says, I take it very seriously. And if he's recommending any kind of book or if he's asking me to check out anything, I always do it. So far, it has been amazing experience. The books that you have suggested, I have read all of them. I love them. I just love them. So Jamie, thank you so much for being a good friend, being a good colleague, and thank you so much for being on my podcast.
Nazmul, thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. So let's get started. And I want to start with a question that you might be interested in. So here we go, okay? If we could, or if you could wave a magic wand, and if you could, have a working life that you would totally love every single day, what would that look like?
My perfect day, essentially, if my magic wand perfect day, is a mixture of my three kind of favorite things. And I actually have these written down on my phone as my aspiring day to day affirmation of success. So for me, it would
Okay.
start by I'm a very early riser. I get up early. I'm exercising. So I'd be stretching and then I'd be water skiing or I'd be snow skiing somewhere magical in the world. I would then come back to my home office, say mid-morning, and I have a series of businesses that I'm working on and that these businesses are healthy, they're moving forward, and they're serving customers. Like I've come to realize that I love to serve, and that's why I own professional services companies. So I own a series of companies that are serving customers, they're happy, they're healthy. Then I have a great dinner with my family. We play a board game or something with the kids. Um, and I finish the day perhaps with cocktails on the dock, watching the sunset. I go to bed early, so I'm not a night owl. I don't need this to be long into the evening. That would be the perfect day for me.
That sounds awesome. That's pretty similar to what I think I would want as well. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. I love it. So you work with a lot of people who work with you remotely, right? So you're big on that. Pipeline Signals has a lot of remote colleagues that you have. Can you tell me one thing that you look into when you're hiring somebody that you want to work with remotely?
So there's obviously the kind of the gatekeeper, and then the what I look for beyond that. The main gatekeeper that gets a candidate to move down a funnel or out and never end up becoming part of the team is communication. And not every role and responsibility in my organization needs to be able to communicate A, like I do, B, even needs to communicate with my customer. But communication comes in so many forms, and I have to be able to ensure that each teammate, if you think of communication as there's some written, there's some verbal, there's the cognizant side of understanding, cognitive side of understanding. I have to ensure that they can comprehend complex ideas and tasks, and but they can also align a task that's been given to them with a bigger picture vision that I've been painting as the organization. And if they can't understand the English language to that level of proficiency, then I know that they're going to struggle communicating with what we'll call stakeholders. Stakeholders are internal employees, vendors, customers, uh, partners, uh, prospects. So that's the gatekeeper. The second is going to come into the future success of the business. And I'm a big believer in decision making and strategic thinking. So, what I have found as a generality, And I noticed this when I was in my early 20s. I moved to Australia. And when I was in Australia, I did my master's degree. And in my master's program, there were students from all around the world. And what set North Americans apart from every other student in the classroom, there's hundreds of students, but as a generality, what I found is the other students from around the world found that us North Americans, it's a bit of a joke that we're cowboys, but we're cowboys because if you give us a box, we don't necessarily think that everything has to be answered within that box. We think many times very outside of the box. And I remember I would do these case studies, and my teammates in my case study were from India. These three guys from Chennai. They were so fun. I hung out with them for most of the 2 years. And they used to say, you North Americans, you're so bad at like science and math and like they couldn't believe the lack of knowledge that myself and the other Canadians that were in these of like basic education. But what they couldn't also understand is how we thought the way we thought. They said every time something comes
Mm,
up, you're not restricted by what you see or what you've experienced in the past. You're willing to think completely different. And the reason I bring this up is I
mm,
have found that when we recruit talent offshore, call it outsourcing, call it offshore or remote, that many times the talent's experience has been you tell me what to do and I do it. You give me task, I do task.
mm,
Problem with that is unless I can think up the task every day and document it, then they're waiting around for me to tell them what to do. And if the task becomes more complex that requires decision making or strategic thinking, they kind of get stuck. They go, well, you told me that the box was the color purple and it was this big, and I don't know what to
mm,
do after that. And so it's really important to create tests or assignments. And then, of course, as you
mm,
onboard and have people successful, to allow them the autonomy to first make mistakes, allow them the autonomy to
mm,
make independent decisions, allow them the autonomy
mm.
to feel that they can make a decision without me being there. And that's really, really important. Otherwise, I become a giant bottleneck.
Got it. No, thank you so much for explaining it this way. I mean, two major parts. One is communicating, and obviously English is a part of it. And then the one you mentioned is, can they think outside the box? Can they think strategically and not just, hey, you told me to do this, this, and this, and I did this, this, and this. So no, that's a great takeaway for anybody who's listening who wants to work, with people like you who live in Canada or Australia or US, right? I might come back to the overall remote working environment and everything else, but I would love to know, because you are the person for social selling. I really have to ask you this. Think about somebody like me. Think about a marketer who is in Bangladesh right now. What would you say your suggestion would be in terms of social selling? How can marketers or somebody else, like maybe a graphic designer, right? How can we utilize social selling so that we can reach out to probably somebody who actually need our help in Canada? What would you suggest? Like, what can be the strategy and what can be the action points?
Yes. So social selling is actually broken out into two frameworks. Framework number one, how do I attract opportunities towards me? And then part two is how do I go get opportunities? So let's first start with how do I attract opportunities to me? As a social seller, the basis of social selling is that you have to appear trustworthy. And one of the most logical platforms for trust is LinkedIn. So I need to create a LinkedIn profile that speaks to the words, the vernacular, to the ideas that my future customer would use. So I'm a graphic designer in Bangladesh trying to attract marketers who would use my services in Canada, the United States. I need to, what I would do tactically, I would review 5 to 10 LinkedIn profiles of the ideal chief marketing officer in Canada that I would want to work with. And I would capture the words, the phrases, the vernacular that they use. And I would craft my LinkedIn profile to demonstrate that strategic understanding of graphic design, and the tactical experiences that I've had with graphic design. Number two, as part of trust, I need to demonstrate that I'm a subject matter expert. That means I'm going to need to share ideas with the world. And those ideas could be shared not only on LinkedIn, but Twitter and Instagram and whatever tool you want. But the purpose here is humans are naturally attracted to social proof. So we need to demonstrate that we understand graphic design. We know the best practices. We know the pitfalls and challenges. We're sharing ideas out in the world for people to capture. So that's kind of where I would start on the inbound. Then eventually you might say to yourself, well, that's great, but people aren't coming to my LinkedIn profile. Now I need to go outbound. So one of the tactical things that you could do as an example is on LinkedIn, there's a jobs section. I would be looking at every company that is looking for graphic design help in North America that meet the type of experience you have. Like if they're looking for graphic design at an agency, but you've had no agency experience, or they're a manufacturer and you've never designed something for manufacturing, maybe you're casting too wide of a net. But if you've always done great graphic design for technology companies and 2D animation, aim towards those type of job referrals. And then I would start crafting messages to the marketing leaders of those organizations. First, start liking and commenting on some of their social posts. Get their attention. Two, when you're sharing messages with them, you need to ensure that you have something where they can get a sense of how good you are. So you have a portfolio, a website, a landing page where they can go. They can click it as you send them a message and they say, wow, like I can envision working with this person. Three, social proof. And this is the big one. Or not social proof, communication. Make them a video. Include that in any message. One of the fears, one of the myths, one of the legacy biases is I don't know if I can work with a teammate offshore in Bangladesh because I don't know if I can communicate with them. But if you, Nazmul, made me a video, I would immediately be disarmed and feel, oh, my legacy bias is untrue. And Nazmul can communicate, and his portfolio is amazing. Maybe I should have a conversation.
I loved it, and I'll tell you why I loved it. You literally summarized the whole thing in such an amazing manner. I have become a really big fan of short form. So there is this website or app called Short Form where you can go and kind of get a summary of the entire book. And so I've been getting a lot. I've been reading a lot of short form books. And if I really like the short form, then I go and actually listen to the whole book. You literally kind of summarized any really good LinkedIn marketing course, any really good social selling course,
Because I invented it.
things that you actually teach. Yeah, yeah, which you invented, and I'm sure you kind of say all of this in a lot more detailed manner where you charge millions of dollars to to companies. So please, everybody who is listening, I would highly recommend go back, watch it all over again, see exactly the points that he just mentioned. So Jamie, thank you so much. Um, a few quick questions. Which one do you think is more important for a company, a marketing department or sales department?
Depending on the stage. And here, this is a really important inflection that companies go through. $0 to $10 million. You're still trying to determine product market fit. You're casting a wide net across a total addressable market. You most likely do not know if do you target the SMB versus mid-market versus enterprise? Are there certain verticals or industries that you target? Do you even know all the roles, what are known as the ideal customer profile? So at 0 to 10 million, the marketing department is vastly more important in acquiring and attracting enough at bats, like enough conversations that allow you to start to isolate and think of it as a fishing analogy. You are sitting in a lake and you are dredging the water with a net, and in there will be minnows and crabs and dolphins and tuna and all kinds of different fish. But you're learning along a journey to get to a certain size. So when I originally wrote the book Social Selling Mastery, I wrote it almost as an homage to helping explain how I grew Sales for Life, 0 to 3 million. And most of the customers I was serving were 0 to 10 to $20 million. But then you're going to hit an inflection point. At this magical number, in and around 10 or $20 million, what ends up happening is companies can no longer feast solely on their inbound leads because the inbound leads are just too much of an assortment of different fish: crabs, minnows, dolphins, tunas, and there isn't enough sustenance. There's not enough meat to feed the growth of the company. So the company then needs to shift to an outbound motion. This is when you start hiring a lot of sales talent because now you need to select and plan the accounts you need to target and start going up market into the enterprise, which a lot of companies find that the marketing team is unable to attract the enterprise at a rate necessary to scale the business. So you need to create a sales team to do that. That has been my experience. I have a regret at Pipeline Signals that we didn't invest in marketing early enough. Now, let's face it, the company's only a year and a half, less than 2 years old. We finally got to it. It's not like we waited to year 20, but should have done it from day one, kind of knowing that this was coming. So I hope that answers your question. I believe that marketing is more important in the early growth of a business, but you're never going to get to a certain size unless I'm talking about complex B2B sales organizations, my experience. I'm not talking about
Hmm.
product led growth
Yeah,
or
yeah,
business to consumer. At some point, you
yeah.
need sales to be able to go after specific accounts because those accounts yield enough average contract value to grow.
I love it. I mean, this is very interesting because you being, as far as I know, again, such a good person in terms of sales, you saying that for early age or early stage businesses, they should go for marketing. This is good. Now let's mix it up between what we just talked about and my previous question. Can you tell me a little more about what are the things that companies usually miss when it comes to social selling? So one or two very important things that people usually miss out, and that's when it doesn't work for them, and they think, oh, it doesn't work. But they probably missed out one or two fundamental things in terms of social selling, right? What are those things for small or mid-sized businesses?
Ironically, we did this long enough to come to recognize it was never around the tools and the platforms that people were using. Many companies were successful with or without a content sharing platform, also known as an employee advocacy tool. Many were successful with or without paid versions of LinkedIn or LinkedIn Sales Navigator. It all actually stemmed to a concept around inertia. An object in motion wants to stay in motion. An object not in motion wants to sit on the couch. And so the concept here is most of the energy to getting a successful social selling program going was about internal communication and buy-in, leadership support, accountability, and doing and putting your head down and doing the same thing over and over again to the point it becomes a routine or a habit. And so the soft skills became way more important than the tactic or the tip or the tool that was being used. Now, there is a process to follow. So that means that as the teammates are executing social selling, it's not that they're doing this for 8 hours a day. That's a giant waste of time. There's a dance routine, 30 minutes a day that you're doing every single day. But it's that consistency that actually creates the success. So I would say the biggest failure, listen, it's no different than everyone wants to have an Olympic level body, but very few of us
Yeah.
do. And the reason being, they'll say to themselves, but I bought the barbells and I bought the elliptical and I have the treadmill. Those are just tools. But if you don't actually
Yeah,
get on the treadmill every day and do your 5 miles, nothing's going to matter.
yeah, yeah. I, execution is the key, right? We can strategize all day,
Consistent
but
execution.
if we don't
Yeah.
execute, it's not going to happen. You pointed out the nice way. Um, so in terms of sales and marketing, right? So maybe, and let's talk about mid-sized businesses, not small, not large, but for mid-sized businesses. For them, obviously there can be a sales department, there can be a marketing department, but what should you say is irreplaceable for a founder? Like, in how many ways, in which ways do you think a founder still needs to be involved with sales and marketing, even though they have full-fledged marketing or sales departments?
I would say a couple things. What I'm now 45 years old, and it took me a long time to understand that if I don't understand it, I don't have to understand everything in a business to a molecular level. I am never going to understand how to code software. But if I don't have basic knowledge of each kind of component,
Mm,
then it's impossible for me to gauge success. Now, in a mid-market company, you start to build expertise in your ELT team. So your sales leader and your marketing leader should be able to gauge those things. But then you're going to have to be able to gauge, is my CMO and my chief revenue officer doing the right things themselves? So I would say, as a founder of a mid-market company, you can gauge that your leaders understand how to coach and lead. They know how to build plans, execute against those plans. Um, and where founders typically stay too long, I made this mistake very poorly at Sales for Life, my first company. I stayed too long in the closing of business. So if you think of a natural sales cycle,
mm,
first thing that you get involved in at any point is demand generation and opening doors because you have no customers. And so then you
mm,
start opening doors. And so look at pipeline signals. We started bring on teammates to help us now open doors because we have already opened doors. Right now I'm in step 2, which is closing the business. And this is where founders hang on way too long. And they fear that they're so good at closing deals that if they give that to somebody else, the conversions are going to change and they're going to lose opportunity. But what they're actually doing is they're stealing from their future. And I didn't know this at Sales for Life, but then we grew to a certain size and we stayed the same size for 7 years. And I want to ensure that at Pipeline Signals, I do not do that. So as early as for Pipeline Signals is as early as $1 million recurring revenue, I'm going to start looking for people to replace me in the deal closing. Yes, people will not have the same conversions and customers will have a different experience, but they have to learn how to do this so that I can work on the next thing. And that next thing might be how sales and customer success come together better. And then in customer success, we have to do the same thing. People, our teammates, like my business partner Mark, cannot stay in the day to day with the customer forever. If he does, we'll get stuck again. Yeah.
yeah, got it, got it. And because we were talking about demand generation and sales and everything else, what do you think where do you think people miss out in terms of having a really good sales pipeline? Where do people make the mistake? And I'm talking about people who, by people, I mean founders. I'm talking about founders who might not be very knowledgeable in terms of marketing, in terms of sales. Where do they miss out? Even if they have a team, and if they come to you and say, hey, it's been a year, I still do not have a good sales pipeline. What stands out to you most of the time? What are they missing?
And we're not there in Pipeline Signals yet, but we got there with Sales for Life. And we got there where you could objectively measure the rate at which leads would come in the door and they would convert and it became clockwork. Now, my experience is different than, say, your experience. I have been a believer of organic development, organic content development, because it's the only experience that I had. I did not have experience with paid media. My fear with paid is it works like a tap. Tap on, leads. Tap off, no leads.
Yeah.
Whereas I needed to build something that was more foundational. And so
Mm.
we got to a point, I was just looking at the historical records of Sales for Life because I was sharing
Mm.
it with somebody, that at its peak, we were creating a sales qualified lead every single day. And so
Wow.
what's amazing is the long tail effect of it. The efforts that were put in 2 years before
Mm.
were the reason why we were now at a lead a day. And eventually at Sales for Life, as we slowed down that marketing, it took actually 2 years as a lagging indicator for the
Mm.
leads to dissipate downward. So it's incredible, all the actions that you and I are doing together, they don't pay off today. But 2 years from now, you'll be so glad. It's the concept of the planting of a tree. Best time to plant a tree, 20 years ago. Second best time, today. So that's my experience, is that um, if you can't forecast deal flow
Mm.
because of lead
Mm.
flow, then you are not in the right position. And I got there in company one. I'm not there in company 2 and 3 yet, but I know in my heart of hearts, we get to a point where lead flow allows me to calculate deal flow, and deal flow will allow me to calculate revenue.
Wow. Why I said wow is because you know how you just mentioned that after working for 2 years, and then it became to the point where you're getting one sales qualified lead per day. It took you 2 years. What I have seen over and over again, and I would say 70% of the time, where if they do not have a marketing department already, right? They don't have a proper marketing department. Maybe they have one marketing executive who is just creating something on Canva and uploading on social media, or just one part-time salesperson or sales intern, and they would expect to build a marketing department and start seeing result within within the third month. And they would think like, what's going on, why is this not working, why is there not any result? But you're saying it took you 2 years to, obviously not to see result, but 2 years to see the kind of flow of SQLs that you wanted. It takes time. It really takes time. And I think all of us need to just accept it and keep working on it. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Well,
Can you now?
and it's hard to
Yeah,
accept.
go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's hard to accept because as a founder, I'm being chased by demons every day. And the demons are, I don't have enough money to sustain this level of patience. At the same time, I
Yeah,
have investors or banking
yeah.
relationships, maybe I have a loan or something like that, that
Mm-hmm.
are breathing down my neck on this side. And then I have family that has demands.
Mm-hmm.
My kids want new sneakers. My kids want to be in certain sports programs. So
Yeah.
that's the reason I was saying this to my business partner, Amar. Every time we make rash decisions, it's because of
Mm.
the financial situation we put ourselves in.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
if if patience is a lot of time dictated because of a lack of capital,
yeah.
but also a lack of capital helps you make way smarter decisions. So, the decisions, I feel like at Sales for Life, I built a $3 million business that was what's called reoccurring, meaning it did $3
Mm.
million a year every year, but it didn't have recurring revenue. You know, to get it from 0 to 3 million, I feel like the level of learning that I accumulated would be like that of a company who did venture capital raise that grew it to 30 million, because I was forced to learn everything at such an intimate level that a venture cap raised business doesn't have to learn. They can just throw money at the problem, right? So
Got it. And so I have a theory, and you tell me, what are your thoughts on it? So I say in a business there should be two or three parts, right? One is I think would be the management team, and then two would be the employees or the coworkers that you might have, and three would be the clients. The moment you include investors, the moment you take a lot of money from other people, now you have to manage another party. Now you have to manage another party's expectations and what they think. They have their ideas that they want you to implement. Don't you think that suddenly you have a lot more work just because you have you got investment?
You absolutely do. I had minority investors in Sales for Life. I have minority investors in Pipeline Signals. But in both situations, they were minority enough where I control the
Mm,
business, I control the destiny.
mm, mm,
I'm not
mm.
at the beck and call like a venture capital raised business
Okay.
where they're now sitting on the board. They have a much more controlling stake in the direction of the business. I thought in my younger years as an entrepreneur, I wanted that. I thought
Mm,
that
mm.
maybe it's because everybody else seemed to be raising capital from venture capitalists. Like it was
Yeah.
like a badge of honor. What I have now seen is more companies blow up than be successful. And that
Mm,
I've seen companies that have worked for 7 to 10 years to end up with nothing, even after selling a successful business, because they've sold so much of their equity, they sold so much of their control and their freedom. I have chosen. I would rather hike the long road, but on
mm,
my
mm.
timeline. Um, because to your point, I think that the amount of time, money, and energy that you spend preparing for board conversations actually distracts a lot of time away from the
Yeah.
customer. No, I was going to say it's a very difficult choice. There are certain companies in certain markets where capital raising is the smart idea because you are trying to capture
Yeah.
market fast.
Hmm.
You are trying to do
Hmm.
things that have to be done in a few years rather than a few decades.
Right. Right.
But this is why most companies are not fit for venture capital. And I have yet to build a company that should raise capital, like raise venture capital.
Yeah, I get it. I got it. So the two experiences that I wanted to share. One was where the person that I was working with, he was saying, "Hey, we need to book 80 meetings within next 1 month." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So we just started working, and then I'm okay. So I would love to see your historical data. Tell me this. So within the past 3 months, every single month, how many meetings were we booking? He's like, six. So that's what I was thinking. Like, how can you expect from 6 to 80? And then I'm asking him, like, okay, that's fine. I understand that you have this expectation, but there must be a reason behind it. You don't look like an irrational person. What is the reason behind it? He's like, that's what I've been promising to my future investors. So I have to, get these meetings. And then I have to go back to them and show that, hey, I talked about having 80 meetings and I did it. I'm like, no, I mean, of course, you can have 80 meetings, but does it really make sense to scale? And can you actually do it, right? We need to be realistic. So that was one. And then the other experience that I had where they raised so much money. And with the money, they also raised from some mafias in a way, the Godfathers, and they started, hypothetically and not literally, pointing guns on their head, right? And they kind of had to do things just the way the investors were saying. The investors are saying, "Hey, you need to do exactly this way. I have seen my father doing it this way, and it worked. You should do it as well." And they had to do it, even though they knew after 6 months it's just not going to work. So yeah, anyway, I've seen both of the sides of, the good sides as well as the bad side of raising funds. And I really think why I even brought it up is because I think it's time to make small business, traditional businesses sexy again. Like, we have talked about startups and raising funds and moving fast and going big. Like, we have been talking about it for the last 10 years, probably, so much so that if I'm launching a traditional business, I keep thinking, is it good enough? Should I do it? Is it worth it? I don't. So I think, and I really push hard on this, that Startup is a startup, and that's good, but it doesn't make the traditional businesses, or the way, we probably, some of us need to do business where we shouldn't raise funds and just go slow, probably build a traditional business. That we I think it's time for us to make those businesses sexy as well. Don't you think?
Well, and I think that there will be a transition in the 2020s. You
Hmm.
have a cohort of people. So if you think about it, if I'm 45, so I actually left. I was working on the stock exchange in 2000 and 2001. So I watched the implosion of the tech bubble. It
Hmm.
totally disenfranchised people for a while around technology. So then all of a sudden, uh, mid 2005, it became sexy again. So anyone just about younger than me, uh, outside of the great financial crash in the United States in 2008, 2009, had only ever seen this world where
Hmm.
it became sexy to talk about how much money you raised,
Hmm.
from whom,
Yeah.
to
Mhm.
how many employees you have, and the pinball machines and the ping pong tables that you have in your fancy office. I
Yeah.
believe there's going to be this huge renaissance of people getting into non-technology businesses that are, and it's all about profitable, and
Hmm.
people might own a bunch of micro businesses and own multiple businesses at the same time, creating diversified sets of revenue. I think there'll be an entire renaissance of, it's sexy to be small and nimble and profitable, and control your life, like actually have a life. I That is my kind of bet that's coming. And there was a podcast I was listening to the other day where they were talking about billionaires,
Hmm.
and they were laughing how, outside of the few tech billionaires that you know from technology, the Elon Musk and the Jeff Bezos, most of them make it in like railroads, iron smelting, steel, like very traditional businesses, real estate.
Hmm.
It is not always just some venture backed tech company.
Right. I really hope that this happens in this 2020 era. Now, I want to move away from business, and then how can people get clients and this and that. Okay, let's move away from that. Now, I would love to learn a few more things from you. As always, how can I get a thicker skin? What would be your advice? How can I get a thicker skin? I promise you, I know for a fact I can make 3 times more money if I just had a thicker skin. What can I do? What would be your suggestion?
Um, this is a learnt skill, as I actually I have an Irish temper, so it has taken me a long time to come to recognize that business is business; it's not personal. That people will try to um, manipulate situations, cut costs, discount your services, but it's all part of a game. If you ever watch certain TV shows, where you watch TV shows about rich people, you sit there and you realize we're all just a bunch of 10-year-olds playing a game. We're playing just a different game as adults. Like, it's who can have what and jockeying for positions. And I think that the more you recognize the business is just an actual game that you're playing,
Hmm.
that kind of takes the seriousness out of it. And then from a thicker skin standpoint, tactically, so I started doing this, and this is actually one of the reasons people do it, is doing cold plunges. So there's a scientific reason
Hmm.
for, you would take a tub, fill it with ice water,
Hmm.
and you sit in it for 1 to 2 minutes a day.
Yeah.
And there's a health benefit, obviously, from a physical, like losing weight and stronger body.
Hmm.
But one of the bigger net effects is it teaches you to get into a very uncomfortable position, ice water, deep breath, relax, and take on a situation that your natural crocodilian brain is telling you, get out of this water. It is terrible. It will force you. It will force you to overcome the fight and flight. It'll force you
Hmm.
from overtly blurting out. And it'll just say, "This too shall pass." I'll calm down. I'll sit in here for a minute or two and I'll move on. So, coming to thicker skin, it can teach you that calm down for a second, we can move forward.
I love it. I will try it. I don't know how it's going to work out, but I will definitely
I
give it a
just did
shot.
my first two
It
minutes.
doesn't sound like fun.
Today I got to 2 minutes. I started when I
Wow.
started it. I started at 18 seconds. I could only do, and now I'm up to 2 minutes.
Okay. So you have a tub and you put ice in it and then you jump in. Is that how it works?
Tub, ice, and water. It's pretty. It's like the
Okay.
cheapest
Yeah.
therapeutic thing you could make. Yeah.
Okay, I'll try, but I can already I have already goosebump. I don't know how it's gonna go, but I'll definitely give it a shot.
Now, I do live in
Um,
a place where ice and
yeah,
cold is usual. So
yeah. Okay, so you love books and you have already recommended some really good books to me, and I read them and I love them, and I'm already taking exercises from them and I'm doing them, already getting benefit. Can you name three books that you read and you were like, oh my god, if I just knew about this book, if I just knew this book existed just 10 years ago, I think wherever I am right now would just make it faster. I'm not saying the 10 years would have become 10 months, but maybe you would have achieved a lot more stuff within 5 years. What are those three
and do you
big
want me
books that
to?
you can recommend to anybody?
Yeah, so I'm actually going into my audibles here. Now, I listen to books. I don't read books. Now, you want this from the framework of a founder and CEO. Okay, from a founder.
Yeah,
I did
sure.
recommend recently to you. I think it's really important for every small business owner to listen to "Buy Back Your Time" from Dan Martell. I think that's a really
Yep.
important one. I think that time management is typically uh, working in your business, not on it, is typically what kills you. Um, if you haven't read Atomic
Yeah.
Habits is very famous for
Yeah.
doing the small things every day.
Mhm.
Let me keep scrolling down here. Another great book for entrepreneurs. There's a good one by Dan Sullivan called "Who, Not How." Kind of shows you
Okay.
that a lot of times you don't need to know how you're going to do something or what even needs to get done. It's people
Yeah.
that help you around you.
Hmm.
Uh, it's the people you surround yourself in your business that actually are the ones that solve the problems for you. I would say that is a good third.
Love it. Well, I'm just happy that I already read two of them. I was probably the third buyer. I wish I was the first one, but I was probably the third buyer of Buy Back Your Time. And then Atomic Habit, I have read it twice at least, line to line, and definitely would have, whenever I'm like probably down or not feeling it. There are three books that I just go back, and it's like watching how you might have some favorite movies. You just go back, you kind of know exactly where things are. You want to watch a scene, you just go there and watch it. I don't know if you do it. I do it. So there are three books that I do it with. One of them would be definitely Atomic Habits. Is like on top of all of them. And then Can't Hurt Me, that was the other one, and Deep Work. So if I say so far, these three books would be, in my opinion, on top. If I had to pick three, um, I love them. I don't know if you have read all three of them. If you
No, I'm
haven't,
going to check
do
those
check them
out.
out. Oh yeah, yeah. So the Can't Hurt Me is all about just keep pushing. So it's a self-help book, but it's somebody who has actually been there, done it, not just talking about it, not just read about it and then he's talking about it. He has done those things. Can't hurt me. So I listen to it when I just want to know, you can do a lot more than you can think that humanly possible, or you think that you can do things. So you can definitely push yourself and go beyond whatever you ever thought in your life. So that's one book. That's why I read it sometimes whenever I want to. The other one is where I really need to focus. That's when I go back to deep work. I just watch, I just listen to a few chapters or read a few lines, and then whenever I know that, oh, okay, my bad habits are coming back over and over again, that's when I go back and listen to this Atomic Habit. But definitely, I will read the third book that you just recommended. Can I ask you this? So, how many kids do you have?
Two.
Which one is your favorite?
Yeah. No, they're equal favorite. They are very equal favorite in different ways. Um,
Okay.
you have a boy, you do boy things with the
Yeah.
boy, right? Like you see yourself in your boy, and all the things
Mm.
that you miss doing as a boy, you get to do again.
Yeah.
With a daughter,
Mm.
you get to see actual beauty, like a flower, like grow, and you
Wow.
get to see all the things that you want. You get to try to mold the daughter, like that you hope the world could see, this like power woman. It's great. And so and they compete against each other in every sport. Like
Okay.
everything is a fist fight.
I can imagine. I can totally imagine. And how many dogs do you have? You have one?
I have one dog. He's 12. He sucks.
Wow. I have three cats. One of them is 16. Can you imagine?
Oh, this
Yeah,
sounds like a
yeah. Oh,
prison sentence.
oh my God. Yeah. Yeah. Can you tell me one or two things that maybe you did not learn from books, but one or two really important things that you learned from your mentors?
Um, so I brought on a mentor in 2018. My first company, Sales for Life, was struggling, and one of the things that he kind of taught me, to summarize it big picture, was optionality. Every decision, I would get very binary in my decision making. So we were having financial troubles. I would say, well, we could only do this or this, and he was like, no, 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 back up. And the the world has many more options to solve problems. Like even as a more creative person, when you get into a situation where you think when you get in that I can't mindset, you
Mm.
feel that there's only black or white. When you realize there's a myriad of ways to make decisions. So what I think that he did really well was help unlock in my mind that every situation has many different avenues to go down. There's not a
Mm.
right or wrong. There's not a right or wrong because you're afraid of what other people will think of you. Like a lot of times in business, we'll say to ourselves, we need to build a company of a certain size because that's what success will be. Well, success to you, or success because you think other people will look at you, and that's what success is. So he helped me understand that I should be building something that serves me, not serves the avatar of me, like doesn't serve the public persona of me.
Yeah, this is interesting. Is so I have a mentor, and one of the biggest learning that I had from him was to be able to ask the right question. I think to be able to ask the right questions, you have to be knowledgeable enough. To be able to ask the right questions, you kind of have to know exactly what are the things that you might not know, and be okay with not knowing a lot of stuff in the world. I think often, especially when you get older, it often happens where I'm thinking I should be knowing this, or I know this. Okay, this is the right way. But I think, deep down, not just saying it for the sake of saying it, but deep down accepting the fact that there will be so many things in the world that I don't know, and even there can be things that I think I know and I think are right can be wrong. So that's what I learned from one of my mentors.
Well, you
I
are an
brought up this to
inquisitive person.
yeah,
I was going to
yeah.
say you are an
Um,
inquisitive person. Yeah.
Thank you. So yeah, so I brought up mentor, and I asked you about how what did you learn? Is because I definitely look at you as a mentor, and so far, again, I mentioned this at the beginning of the podcast. So far, you've been very kind to me. I have asked you so many different questions in so many ways. You have always answered in such a way where it's very digestible. A lot of people would answer a question, but it's not easily digestible. But I can digest exactly what you just said, and then I can actually execute on things that you just mentioned. So thank you so much for always advising me on things that I always get stuck with and ask you questions. Thank you so much for being so
Thank you
nice
so
with me.
much.
Last question. Last question. What do you like about working with me?
Because you always come with a positive attitude. There isn't a, you start every call with a smile, you end every call with a smile. I think that um, we don't all know the answers to everything. We don't know how we're going to get from point A to point B, and we'll learn it on the journey. But you come with such a positive attitude to say, hey, I've got this set of skills. I'm going to give everything that I can. You always get, you know, we want to go from point A to B, and there's milestones along the way. Every week, you execute against some milestones. You're not full of excuses or anything. And every call, just positive. Okay, what do we do next? So,
Thank you, thank you. Honestly, it's like it goes both ways, right? I think it's you always inspire me, and the entire team inspires me, and I think I love the fact that we have conversations and not just like, hey, what did you do today, or why did it not get done? That's what I like working with you. That's what I like about working with you, and thank you so much for being so nice to me. With this has been such a great podcast. I have so many more questions. I know time is of the essence. I know how important your time is and how much you cherish it. Thank you so much for being in this podcast and explaining all of these amazing things that you have learned in so many years. This podcast will definitely be probably in two separate parts, and we're going to chop it out and give it to different platforms, and not just because that's how we should do it, but because I know for a fact that this will help so many people. We talked about founders, we talked about the struggles they might have, we talked about how can people from Bangladesh, get to work with people like you. We talked about a few personal things and the books that you might recommend. So thank you again for being in this podcast, and see you very soon, Jamie. And anybody who wants to follow Jamie, I'll give the link below of his LinkedIn. Do follow him. He's such a fantastic guy. He shares information, whatever he has, whatever knowledge he has, he shares it without holding back. So please do follow him.
awesome.